We saved the best for the last. Week 14 NFL highlights are coming up next. It's hard to believe that we're already in week 14. There was a lot of big games that happened this week, and I'll give you all the action that happened on Sunday and Monday. Chiefs versus Dolphins, the reigning Super Bowl champs, the Kansas City Chiefs traveled to Miami to take on the Dolphins. This was the first time the Chiefs traveled to Miami since their Super Bowl victory in February. The Chiefs were 11-1, hoping to take the number one seed in the AFC with a win and a Steelers loss. The game started out with the rare lead by the young Dolphins. Miami had an early 10-0 lead and forced two early interceptions by Patrick Mahomes. Crazy stat, Mahomes had only thrown two interceptions all year. But KC would get two touchdowns late in the second quarter to go up 14-10 at the half. One by Tyreek Hill and the other from a Patrick Mahomes to Travis Kelce touchdown pass. The Chiefs would dominate the Dolphins in the third quarter and get a 30-10 lead thanks to a huge safety by Chris Jones in the third quarter. The Dolphins would make a comeback, but it wasn't good enough as the Chiefs would hold on to beat the Dolphins 33-27. Mahomes was 24 of 33 for 393 yards, two touchdowns, and a rare 3 INTs. Tyreek Hill had one carry for 32 yards and a score. Travis Kelce, an Offensive Player of the Year candidate, had 9 receptions for 136 yards and one touchdown. No tight end has ever won the award. Tagovailoa was 28 of 48 for 316 yards, two touchdowns, and 2 INTs. DeAndre Washington led the Dolphins in rushing with 35 yards and 13 carries. He filled in for Myles Gaskin. Lynn Bowden Jr. had 7 receptions for 82 yards. The 7-5 Buccaneers hosted the 6-6 Minnesota Vikings. Tampa was coming off a much-needed bye, and the Vikings were coming off a big win versus the Jags. The Bucs are still trying to compete with the Saints for the NFC South title, and the Vikings, on the other hand, still have a chance to make the playoffs and need a win to continue that trend. Minnesota jumped out to an early 6-0 lead, but the big story was the special teams was horrible by the Vikings. Dan Bailey missed 3 field goals and that extra point. Tom Brady would take advantage as he would find Scotty Miller in the end zone and take the lead. They would have a 17-6 lead at the half and would never look back. Brady would find Gronk in the opening drive in the third quarter and to increase their lead 23-6. Kirk Cousins had one more touchdown pass, this time to Irv Smith, but it wasn't good enough. The Buccaneers defeat the Vikings 26-14. Brady was 15 of 23 for 196 yards and 2 touchdowns. Ronald Jones had 80 yards on 18 carries for 1 touchdown. Mike Evans led Tampa in receiving with 56 yards on 3 catches. Kirk Cousins was 24 of 37 for 225 yards and 1 touchdown. Dalvin Cook continued his tear with 102 yards on the ground on 22 carries and 1 touchdown. Irv Smith had 4 receptions for 63 yards and 1 touchdown. The Tennessee Titans traveled to Duval County to face the AFC rival, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Tennessee was wanting to rebound against their tough loss against Cleveland. Ryan Tannehill would start the game off hot as he would find A.J. Brown for a 37-yard touchdown. A few drives later, Derrick Henry would find the end zone, and all of a sudden the Titans had an early 14-0 lead. The Titans got some more points thanks to a field goal by Steven Gronkowski to take a 17-3 lead at the half. Derrick Henry led the Titans on the opening drive of the second half to increase their lead to 24-3. They would eventually have a 31-3 lead, and the Jaguars would eventually score to make it 31-10. The Titans would get their 9th win of the season by beating Jacksonville. Ryan Tannehill was 19 of 24 for 212 yards and 2 touchdown passes. Derrick Henry had a monster day with 215 yards on 26 carries. A.J. Brown is proving to fans that he is a legit wide receiver with 112 yards receiving and 1 touchdown. Well, Gardner Minshew was back. He was all right. 18 of 31 for 178 yards and 1 touchdown pass. Josh Robinson had 67 yards on 12 carries. Kellen Core led the way with receiving for Jacksonville as he had 67 yards on 7 receptions and he added 1 touchdown. The Arizona Cardinals were trying to get back into the playoffs with a win versus the Giants. The Giants were trying to continue their lead in the NFC East. The Giants opened up the game with a Daniel Jones fumble, but they couldn't capitalize, and the Giants would get the ball right back as Arizona would turn the ball over on downs. Arizona eventually would get a few field goals, and then we get a touchdown from Kyler Murray to Dan Arnold to have a 13-0 at the break. Arizona didn't stop there as Kenyon Drake would find the end zone, and the Cardinals had a 20-0 lead. The Kyler Murray-led Cardinals would get 2 more field goals and force 8 sacks. The Giants would score, but it wasn't good enough as the Cards would dominate and win 26-7 over New York. Kyler Murray was hot. He threw for 244 yards, one score, and was 24 of 35. Kenyon Drake had 80 yards on 23 carries and one touchdown. DeAndre Hopkins, another Offensive Player of the Year candidate, had 9 receptions for 136 yards. Daniel Jones left the game with an injury, but still led New York in passing. He was 11 of 21 for 127 yards. Wayne Gallman had a solid day on 57 yards on 12 carries, and Golden Tate had 1 reception for 39 yards. The Green Bay Packers were hoping to sweep the Detroit Lions for the second straight year and take the top seed in the NFC. The Lions, despite having a losing record, still have a shot at the wild card in the postseason. The Lions tried hard, but let's be honest, it wasn't quite enough. The Packers would hold on, and Aaron Rodgers would continue his tear for the MVP this season. He threw 3 touchdowns, and for the second straight year, the Green Bay Packers have clinched the NFC North title and the 7th in 10 years. However, the Lions actually struck first, as Matt Stafford found second-year tight end T.J. Hockenson. The Packers would score 14 unanswered points as Aaron Rodgers found Devontae Adams and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. The rookie running back DeAndre Swift would score to tie the game up at 14. However, Green Bay scored 17 points in the second half to edge out Detroit 31-24. Rodgers was 26 of 33 for 290 yards and 3 touchdowns. Aaron Jones had 15 carries for 69 yards, and Devontae Adams had 7 receptions for 115 yards and 1 score. The New Orleans Saints traveled to Philly to take on the struggling Eagles. Jalen Hurts for the Eagles would get his first career start as they would bench Carson Wentz. Hurts is a rookie and was drafted in the second round in last year or in the 2020 draft. The Saints led the NFC with a 10-2 record and have been dominating the recent weeks. But New Orleans, they wouldn't dominate this game. It'd be the Jalen Hurts show. It hurts so good for New Orleans. Jalen Hurts threw for 167 yards and 1 touchdown. They jumped out to a 17-0 lead at the half. The Saints would come back, but it wasn't good enough as they would fall 24-17. The Saints in the first half weren't spectacular at all. They punted the ball 3 times, missed a field goal, and turned the ball over twice. Miles Sanders for the Eagles had a great game with 115 yards on 14 carries and 2 scores. The Eagles offense, or the whole team for the Eagles, actually looked jubilant after a big victory over the Saints. Maybe this team is better with Jalen Hurts than Carson Wentz because they look definitely energized and they just looked more of a team on Sunday. Jalen Reagor had 2 receptions for 46 yards to lead the Eagles in receiving. Taysom Hill had a pretty good game despite losing as he threw for 291 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Alvin Kamara had 11 carries for 50 yards and 1 touchdown. And Kent Mike had 8 receptions for 84 yards. Well, the Jets are only 3 games away from becoming the 4th team in NFL history to not win a single game in a season. The Seattle Seahawks cruised over the New York Jets 40-3. There's not a lot of highlights in this game. Sorry about that. The Seahawks are now 9-4, and currently they take the 5th seed in the NFC playoff picture. The 3 words that the Seahawks like to use: let Russ cook. He threw for 206 yards, 4 touchdown passes, and 1 interception. The Seahawks led the Jets 23-3 at the break. To give the Jets fans some hope, they did score the first possession, and they had a 3-0 lead at one time. However, they were outscored 40-0 after that. The Seahawks scored 17 points in the second half, and the Jets, of course, would score nothing after scoring a field goal in the first drive of the game. Chris Carson had 76 yards on the ground and had 12 carries and 1 touchdown. DK Metcalf, a rising superstar, had 6 receptions for 61 yards and 1 touchdown. Sam Darnold for the Jets was 14 of 26 for 132 yards. Josh Adams from Notre Dame had 6 carries for 27 yards, and Braxton Burrows led the way for the Jets in receiving. He had 3 receptions for 49 yards. The Washington football team continued their Cinderella run and their 3rd straight win. Despite all the drama earlier in the season, or before the season started, Washington has a slight lead on the Giants for the NFC East. Washington trailed early, but took a 13-7 lead at the half. Cameron Curl would have a 76-yard pick six to increase Washington's lead 23-7. San Francisco would answer with a touchdown pass from Nick Mullins to Kyle Juszczyk. They get the 2-point conversion, but it wasn't good enough. Washington would hold on to beat San Francisco at 23-15. Some other highlights were number 2 overall pick Chase Young getting a fumble and took it to the house for 47 yards. Alex Smith did leave the game, and former first-round pick Dwayne Haskins filled in for Smith and held on to beat the Niners. Alex Smith was 18 of 19 for 57 yards and 1 interception. J.D. McKissick had 11 carries for 68 yards, and Logan Thomas, the former quarterback, had 6 receptions for 43 yards. Nick Mullins was 25 of 45 for 260 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Raheem Mostert had 14 carries for 65 yards, and Brandon Ayuk had 10 receptions for 119 yards. Now we travel to Vegas, where the Raiders hosted the Indianapolis Colts. Both Indy and Vegas needed to win or needed a win to stay or still be in contention for the playoffs. The 8-4 Colts took on the 7-5 Raiders. The Colts started off quickly with a 10-0 lead in the first quarter. Indy would have a 20-14 lead at the half. Phillip Rivers had 2 touchdown passes in the first half, both to T.Y. Hilton. They would force a Derek Carr interception late in the first half and get a field goal out of it. The Raiders would get a 25-yard Daniel Carlson field goal to trim the Indy's lead to 3. Jonathan Taylor, however, would get a 62-yard rush in the third quarter to put the Colts up by 10. To seal the win, Indy would get a pick 6, which was returned for 50 yards at the house. Final score, the Colts 44, the Raiders 27. Rivers was 19 of 28 for 244 yards and 2 touchdown passes. Jonathan Taylor had a monstrous game with 150 yards rushing on 20 carries, and 2 touchdowns. T.Y. Hilton had 86 yards receiving on 5 receptions and 2 touchdowns. Carr was 31 of 45 for 316 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Josh Jacobs had 49 yards on the ground, and Nelson Aguilar had 100 yards receiving, 5 receptions, and he had a touchdown as well. But the second straight week, the Steelers fall, this time the Bills on primetime television. The Bills haven't won their division since 95, but have a good chance of doing it. With the win, the Bills are now 10-3 and still have a shot at the number 1 seed in the AFC. Not much happened in the first half as both teams exchanged punting the ball until the Bills would fumble and the Steelers would strike first. Big Ben would find Deontay Johnson, and guess what? Johnson caught it. He didn't drop it this time. They went up 7-0. The Bills would get a field goal to put some points on the board before the half, but Big Ben would throw a costly interception, and the Bills would return to the house to make it a 9-7 lead. They would miss the extra point, though. Buffalo dominated Pittsburgh in the second half. They would outscore the Steelers 17-8 in the second half. The Steelers would score, then get a 2-point conversion to make the game a little more respectable. Final score, the Bills 26, the Steelers 15. Josh Allen put himself back into the MVP conversation as he threw for 238 yards on 24 completions, 2 touchdown passes, and 2 interceptions. Zach Moss had 43 yards rushing. Stephon Diggs had 10 receptions for 130 yards and 1 touchdown. What a year Stephon Diggs has had. Great pickup by the Bills by trading for Stephon Diggs, who was from Minnesota last year, which a lot of people thought that was a bad move by Buffalo. What are they trading for a receiver that complains a lot? Well, he's been a great addition for Josh Allen. For Pittsburgh, Big Ben threw for 187 yards on 21 completions, 2 touchdown passes, and 2 INTs. James Conner struggled and only had 18 yards rushing on 10 carries. Juju Smith-Schuster had 55 yards receiving and 1 touchdown. The game of the year just happened on Monday Night Football. A division rivalry took place in Cleveland, Ohio. The Browns, yes, the Browns are 9-4. Were hosting the 7-5 Ravens. Cleveland didn't need to win as badly as Baltimore did. I can't believe what I'm saying. What a year it's been. The Ravens pretty much needed to win every game to make the postseason. The Browns already clinched a winning record and are very close to clinching a playoff berth for the first time since 2003. The Ravens jumped out to a 21-14 lead at the half thanks to 2 rushing touchdowns by Lamar Jackson. Mayfield threw a touchdown pass in the first half as well. On the opening drive of the second half, the Ravens would get a score from Gus Edwards after Jackson had a huge run the play before. But here come the Brownies. After Cleveland threw an interception to increase the AFC North champs lead 34-20, the Browns would score and get the 2-point conversion to trim the Ravens lead to 6. However, Lamar Jackson left the game because he was dealing with multiple cramps. Backup quarterback Trace McSorley came in for Jackson and did all right until he got hurt. With the Browns leading by 4 in the fourth quarter and the Ravens with less than 3 minutes left to play, Lamar Jackson would come back to the game on 4th down and possibly Baltimore's last chance to score. And if they don't get anything, their season is done. However, the reigning MVP would respond as he would find Marquise Brown for a 44-yard touchdown, and then J.K. Dobbins would get the 2-point conversion to go up by 7. But the game's not over yet. Cleveland would score on their next possession to tie the game at 42 with just 64 seconds left in the game. But they gave too much time for the reigning league MVP, Lamar Jackson. Jackson and the Ravens offense would drive down the field and get a game-winning 55-yard field goal by the most accurate kicker in league history, Justin Tucker. The Ravens would get a safety on the final play of the game to win 47-42. Jackson was 11 of 17 for 163 yards and a touchdown pass. He also led the team in rushing for 9 carries, 124 yards, and 2 touchdowns. By the way, Lamar Jackson broke Donovan McNabb's record for the most rushing yards by a quarterback on Monday Night Football. Mark Andrews had 5 receptions for 78 yards. On the other side, Baker Mayfield was 28 of 47 for 343 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Nick Chubb had 82 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. Kareem Hunt had 77 yards receiving on 6 receptions and 1 touchdown. Fans were calling Lamar Jackson Superman after coming out of the locker room to beat the Browns. Well, the Ravens, 8-5, have a very good chance of making the playoffs now because their schedule is very favorable. They're home against Jacksonville, and on top of that, they're home against the New York Giants, and then they finish the year at Cincinnati. Very favorable schedule. However, the Browns could still somewhat miss the playoffs because their schedule is pretty tough. They play the Giants in Week 15, and they still got the Steelers in Week 17. There is a chance that the Ravens, if they have the same record as the Ravens, or as the same record as the Browns, could leap them. Now, I think the Browns are still going to make the playoffs, probably as a 6 or 7, but there's a good chance the Ravens can get the 5th seed. Baltimore, however, cannot win the AFC North, as that is either Baltimore or Cleveland's, which are not. That's either Pittsburgh's or Cleveland, which right now I think the Steelers are win because they got the Bengals next week and they have a somewhat of an easy schedule, but I think Pittsburgh's going to win that division. But both Cleveland and Baltimore have a good chance of making the playoffs as a wild card.